Hey guys, I apologize for that. Someone had called me multiple times, and so I thought that might have been an emergency, so that has been taken care of. Let us finish our Bible study tonight. Everything seems to win against us, and that's okay. God is still good and faithful, and that is what we need to be reminded of. So, I apparently need to be reminded of that as well. Genesis chapter 27. The question is, how are the good promises of God going to continue on to the descendants after Abraham? And so in verse 1, we already see Isaac. I mean, we've practically skipped all of Isaac's life. Isaac is old, and so he calls for his son Esau in verse 4, who's his firstborn. Prepare delicious food that my soul may bless you before I die. It's so important to have the blessings of the line of Abraham, because remember the promise in chapter 12 that God is going to bless all people. So you want to be the person through whom the blessings continue to go. You want to be the person that continues the line of the blessing of Abraham. Verses 5 through 9, Rebekah, which is Isaac's wife, hatches a plan for her son Jacob to be blessed instead of Esau. She wants Jacob to be the one that the line and promises of Abraham pass through, just like in the previous story of Abraham, the promises went through Isaac and not through Ishmael. Rebekah wants the promises to go through Jacob and not through Esau. So they hatch a plan. Verse 10, she says, she's like, you're going to bring this to your father to eat so that he may bless you before he dies. She's like, I'm going to give you what you need. But he says, perhaps, this is verse 12, perhaps my father will feel me, and I shall seem to be mocking him and bring a curse upon myself and not a blessing. Understand how important that is. When Cain was cursed back in Genesis 4, you don't want the curse of God to be upon you. We think of Abraham, or not Abraham, but Adam and Eve and the serpent all being cursed in Genesis chapter 3. So Jacob's like, listen, if this deception does not work, then I could be cursed instead of becoming the person whom the blessings of God flow through. So he's concerned. Rebekah tells Jacob, go ahead and get what you need. I'll take care of it. So they prepared to deceive Isaac. Verse 19, Jacob says to his father, after his mother's prepared everything, he says, I am Esau, your firstborn. So he lies bold-facedly to his father. I have done as you told me. Now sit up and eat my game that your soul may bless me. Again, the importance of being blessed. Verse 20, the Lord, your God, granted me success. Not only does he lie about who he is, he says, oh, God gave me great success. That's why I showed up with food so quickly, bringing the Lord into it. Verse 22, the voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. So Isaac knows that this doesn't sound like Esau, but they've already put animal skins on his hands and arms because Esau was so hairy, he wanted to try to deceive him. I mean, the extent and level of deception here is just the next level. Verse 23, it says, so he blessed him. So Jacob got what he wanted. He blessed him. Verse 24, are you really my son Esau? So here's some doubt, and Jacob again lies. He says, I am. Verses 27 through 29, Isaac blesses him and makes a pronouncement over his life of blessing. Verse 30, as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of Isaac. I love how the author of Genesis writes this drama into the story. He says Jacob had just barely left the tent. I mean, like barely. It's as if he had left it and then Esau came around the other side. It's almost like a soap opera going on. Esau came in from his hunting. Verse 33, Isaac trembled very violently. Whenever Esau comes in with what he had been told to do, Isaac trembles and says, who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me, and I ate it all before you came? I have blessed him. Yes, and he shall be blessed. Isaac trembles because in this moment he knows he's been deceived, but he is already giving the blessing away. The blessing is so important that Esau says this in verse 34, bless me, even me also, O my father. Blessing is so important here. But Esau will not get it, and Jacob has. Verse 35, your brother came deceitfully, and he has taken away your blessing. The question in this chapter is, if God has made good promises to the descendants of Abraham, and Abraham proved to be a person that was faithful to God. What happens to the promises of God if those that are promised to try to go about getting them in a way that is not godly? Goes about getting them in a way that is deception or stealing? Can the blessing of God be stolen? Can someone deceitfully snatch it or gain access to it by means that is not godly? Verse 37, I have made him Lord over you and all of his brothers. I have given to him for servants, and with grain and wine I have sustained him. What then can I do for you, my son? So he's like, I've given all these blessings to you. Verse 41, Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, the days of mourning my father are approaching. Then I will kill my brother Jacob. So Jacob succeeded in getting the blessing. However, Esau is now planning to kill Jacob. In verse 42 through 46, Rebekah overhears Esau's plans and she sends Jacob away. Verse 42, behold, your brother Esau comforts himself about you by planning to kill you. It's a comforting thought to Esau that he's going to kill his brother to make things right. Now, these are the grandsons of Abraham. I don't think that Abraham would be very pleased with the actions of either of these grandsons. And it begs the question, is God still going to provide the blessing he has promised to Abraham that's going to affect the whole world? Is God still going to provide that blessing, or is he going to take it back? Has humanity finally done enough that God says, listen, you know what, you're not worth my love, my attention. I've made a covenant, but I'm just going to break it here. We leave in verses 43. It says, arise, flee to Laban my brother in Haran, stay with him a while until your brother's fury turns away. Rebekah thinks that eventually Esau's anger is going to pass away. We're going to revisit this later and see if that is actually the case. So as we close chapter 27 of God's unfolding story, what we see is the promises of God to Abraham seem once again in shambles. How is God's promise going to pass through a family that is this broken? Can God's love and plans and purposes even come true in the midst of such brokenness? Even families that are falling apart, that are not perfect, families that argue on their way to church every Sunday morning, things that, like, horrible things that have been done, brother against brother, sister against sister, brother against sister, parents to their, or kids to their parents, parents to their kids, picking favorites, all of this stuff. Is there anything that we can do to hinder God's good plans for us? Is the question that we close with chapter 27. So we're going to have to pick up next week and see what happens to this, the story of Abraham's descendants. Is God's blessing going to continue to flow through them? So guys, I hope that you've had a good time with our Bible study. There's going to be 2 videos because I had that interruption. So there's going to be a part 1 and a part 2. And hopefully you guys can follow along with that. Guys, we're planning to have services in person this Sunday at 9 a.m. and 11. Of course, mass distancing, that has worked well for us. So we're going to continue that. If you want to start collecting canned foods for the month of February, that's what we're going to do to help our Riverside Food Pantry. If you don't want to collect stuff, you can always bring money to Wanda, who will make a run to get some of that stuff. And I think that's the announcements that we have. I will remind you that our 2021 proposed budget did pass at our business meeting. We also did vote to have Rose Maddox as our new treasurer for the church. So please make sure that you, if you have a question about the budget, if you'd like a copy of that, we can get that to you. Guys, I love you. I'm praying